Behold, my glorious supporter, True Mr.FOoT, has requested some discussion about God's fear. Well, I couldn't think of a better lower caption for this one. True Mr.FOoT asks, do you think God is afraid of what they've created? So for this one, a pretty simple question, pretty short, open-ended question. I'm going to give you sort of an obvious, what I think is kind of an obvious interpretation, and then what I think is kind of an interesting interpretation. The obvious interpretation, I think, is that God is, a Christian God, for example, that God, if you will. If you are religious or specifically Christian, I don't mean any offense. I'm just saying, as someone who doesn't believe in that, I've got to pick some major religion's God, version of God, interpretation of God. You could argue that they're the same. That's an interesting religious belief that makes a lot of sense to me for what it's worth. But well, let's just say that. You get what I'm saying? I hope it doesn't bother you that I'm going to oversimplify that way. And then what they've created, often stereotypically, that's meant to imply humans, you know. I'm not saying that it always means this, but a lot of the time the formulation of the phrase God afraid of what they've created, what they've created means humanity, and rather than like Earth, for example, or the universe, or, you know, etc., the atmosphere, the sun, you know. And I would say no. I don't see how an omnipotent, all-powerful, and omniscient, all-knowing being would ever be afraid of anything, besides the crushing reality that even infinite power doesn't stop the endless march of entropy in the universe. Oh, whoops, sorry, that's a different parlay. Well, haha, just push your feelings down. And so I think, no, if anything, they would be amused. If they did anything, being that they are in need of nothing because they're all-powerful and all-knowing, I think they would only do things for their own amusement. And so are they amused? Probably. Are they afraid? Yeah, probably not. Of what, I guess is what I would say. I think fear often comes from the unknown. And if there's nothing unknown, it's a little bit difficult to fear anything except because you now know it's inevitable. You know the feeling when you're going to get a shot, like I, and hopefully all of you, have been getting the COVID-19 vaccine, and you know the needle is going to go in, so it hurts more. I one time tried acupuncture. I got an acupuncture treatment, and the person who put the needles in was so professional that I didn't even... It felt like she was just kind of poking parts of my body, thinking like, okay, we'll do there and there and there, you know, marking them, and then later would do the needles. And then after a moment, I said, "Are you putting needles in?" And she was like, "Yeah, no, there's like 5 in already." And you see, like, because I wasn't afraid because I didn't expect a needle to come in, and I didn't know there was going to be a needle there. It didn't hurt as much, you know, as much. Obviously, if I punch you in the face and you didn't know, or you didn't think it was inevitable, it would still hurt. You understand what I'm trying to say? I think fear largely comes from the unknown, or like a total uncertainty or total certainty. And so humans, generally, we are in a world full of things to be afraid of, but we're not crippled by fear a lot of the time. Well, okay, I'll speak for myself maybe. Because we are not completely sure or completely unsure of pretty much anything. Humans are defined by nebulousness, and so surprisingly, we're not afraid of that much. I guess you could argue, I just talked myself out of my own argument, that therefore God, an omnipotent, omniscient God, might actually be more defined by fear than we would be. But I don't think so. I think that certainty is often... it's only a source of fear when it's immediate. It kind of goes away over time. You know, I'm afraid of dying, but just not that often. You know, I feel certain that I will die, but I mean, it's a long way off. It doesn't occupy my mental real estate that much. You see what I'm saying? So I think, no, God is not afraid of what they've created in that sense. On to part 2, my sense of God and what they've created. I don't need to reinterpret afraid. God, then, for me, I don't believe in a God in what you're probably thinking of when I say the word God. But I do feel very strongly about, I call the collective unconsciousness. Let me explain what that is, and then we'll move on to the next part. So the idea here is that When you walk around, I remember imagining this on my college campus. It's a college campus. It's a liberal arts college campus. So you're imagining there's, big stretches of green and then little concrete paved asphalt, whatever, not concrete, always, walkways, going across those stretches of green. And the metaphor for me was that most people won't walk on the grass, even if it's a faster way to get there. They'll just take the path. And the reason is it's just easier. It's not like they have to take the path, but they sort of do. In a way, it's like they're sort of autopiloting walking to class. There's nothing wrong with that. People do that all the time. That's kind of part of what paths are for, And so when autopiloting, that program in your brain kind of needs some train tracks, but obviously you could walk off them and it's fine. They're not like afraid of or hesitant to step on the grass. It's something kind of in between those two things. Imagine instead that there are glass or transparent or translucent walls around them as they walk to class. They can breach the wall. They can, but there's still something there, That to me is the stream of the collective unconsciousness. It's not a bad thing. It's not a good thing. There's immediately going to be people who think I'm saying it's better to do things deliberately. No, a lot of the time when you do something on purpose rather than just sort of going with the flow, that thing is a gamble that you don't have any good reason to believe will provide you value. You're exerting effort for all for nothing. It's not a high and mighty position to be in. It is, however, something that I do a lot. I overthink almost every decision I make, even very mundane ones, like I don't brush my teeth at the same time every day. I vary it for no reason. Not on purpose even, really. I just don't do things consistently. It's just who I am. I don't do that. That's not good. That's not better. It would be more efficient to just form a habit out of brushing your teeth, right? It's not glorious to do things deliberately, and other people are sheeple that need to get woke. Like, no one is saying that. Shut up. That's not what I mean at all. I'm just saying we as human beings, all to varying degrees, do some things one way and some things the other way. That's all I'm trying to say. The collective unconsciousness things, yes, I mean, at the end of the day, they are less defined by our own desires. They're kind of just things that happen because we are humans living in a human world, right? That overall trajectory is the God that I'm describing here. Does that make sense? I hope it makes sense. You can't say it doesn't. We're moving on. And afraid of what they've created then is human society, the world that they live in. Capitalism, for example, just spitballing here, just for an example, right? And I think the answer is yes. I think that most people are deeply subconsciously, they wouldn't say this, I don't think, deeply subconsciously, deeply afraid of the world that we are all locked into, essentially. It feels terrible once you start. I mean, I haven't quite had this experience, but I know from experience, for you look around, it's easy to see that a lot of people kind of get to the point in their life where they've got their job stable, their life stabilizes, and that feels good for a time. But then the reality of what adult life is in this world that we live in is kind of impacts them, and it's not good. Like it's not something to be happy about in most of the time. They might get married or have children, and I'm sure some of you watching are married or have children, and you did those things for very good reasons, for out of love, out of happiness. I'm not talking about you when I say this, but I'm sure you know that a lot of people, probably most people, do that not for those reasons, but to sort of stave off the endless churn of industry or whatever you say some dramatic term here, And to me, the way that people live their lives that way is a sign of fear. The way that people go on vacations that are too short to really be restful, and it ends up just being stressful and they spend more money, that is an act of fear in a way. I hope it makes sense what I mean. They're not feeling fear exactly, but the motivation, it's like, why are they doing that then? It doesn't really benefit them. And I would argue that the force behind it is anxiety or fear. And maybe anxiety is a better word here, I suppose, but because fear makes it sound like a sort of they're actively doing something, which I don't think they are. Anyway, that is what I think. And to me, the thing that I do for a living, where I go on the internet and try to make an impression on people, is basically like that. Basically, I have to try to take a chunk out of divert that flow of the collective unconsciousness enough that I can sort of do something and make my own little mini whirlpool that sustains itself, because enough people are willing to sort of divert and do a thing with me. You know, when people watch my videos on the main channel, on the Zany Pants channel, if I said, you know, subscribe to my Patreon or whatever in every video, which I'm never going to do, but a lot of people do, why don't people do that? Is it because for so many of them, my videos are not worth $1 a month? No, I don't think so. I think that we can agree that probably most people who watch all of the framework videos, for example, they would probably agree if they were asked with no like ulterior motives or whatever, probably not by me, is this worth $1 a month to you? They would say yes, probably. So why don't they do that? Well, because it's breaching that wall, that sort of transparent wall. Again, you can do it. It's not like they can't do it, but people don't assert willpower for no reason. I mean, I do, but again, I'm just trying to explain, like, that's not good. It doesn't make me, you know, this active person who's taking control of their own destiny. Like, I guess it does, but that's not a good thing a lot of the time. You know, it's a waste of effort a lot of the time. It's just who I am. For most people, they deploy that willpower, not very much. And then for some people, I think more people than the people that are acting the way I am, and less people than the people that don't apply their willpower very much, they deploy it tactfully at times that make sense. Probably a lot of you, I would guess. That's probably the demographic I'm talking to here. Not people that quixotically apply their will to everything like me, and not people that just kind of do whatever and things just sort of happen to them, and they very rarely, you could count on one hand the times that they really divert themselves from what would have happened. I'm sorry, I'm just really cynical about people acting like that because it's the cause of almost every problem in the world. Like, the solution isn't to get the people that are going with the flow to do something different, because that's the hardest way to solve any problem. There's the most people and you have the least ability to affect them because they're just not really affected by anything. But at the same time, the key thing about the collective unconsciousness is it has no will. It doesn't really have a will of its own. It just sort of goes. It's like water. It's a flow of water. It will go through the path of least resistance. And so what you can do, rather than getting everybody to stop buying a cup of coffee so they don't use a disposable cup of coffee, or even if they use a reusable cup of coffee, just the amount of waste in, you know, Starbucks or whatever, and get them to brew their own cup of coffee because it's more sustainable and it takes less time and it tastes better. It's better in every way. They just wouldn't apply the will to shift themselves to doing that. It doesn't really take a meaningful amount of work. You can get a robot that does it, blah, blah, blah. Rather than doing that to billions of people, like, okay, you know, it's possible, I guess. And in a way, it's like each individual person would have to do very little, but there's no possible way to get people to do that. It's just not possible. People try all the time. You'll see YouTube videos saying, hey, stop, you know, make your own coffee because it takes basically no effort. You can get a pour over robot. All you have to do is buy coffee and throw it in the thing. That's it. It doesn't take more effort than going to Starbucks. It tastes better. It's cheaper. There's no drawback. You should always do that. Every single person in the world is wrong for not doing that. Unless you're in a hotel and I'm sure there are people okay. No, rather than doing that, you want to influence the CEO of Starbucks to just make the company not have coffee cups. But if they do that, then they'll lose market share to Dunkin' Donuts. So you need to make both of that. But then independent coffee shop, well, it would be good if independent coffee shops did better. But nobody will make that change. And so that's why it has been changed, you see. And so if you want to do something about that, you can either be the person who deliberately tries to take control of the coffee industry, or be the person who tries to take a chunk out of the collective unconsciousness flow and do a thing. And in both of those cases, somebody like me is as well afraid of the human society that has been created around them, because I'm trying to stop it. My every action in life, if you look at it this way, is defined by trying to stop people from doing what they would have done on their own and make them do something else instead, because the things that they do automatically are bad for them, for me, for other people, for everyone. I'm not saying everything that everyone does non-deliberately is bad, but I'm pointing out why I would say I think almost every human being is afraid of like other human beings, like the mass of other human beings. I certainly know I am. Anyway, thanks for asking. I hope that you enjoyed this way I decided to answer it, and I look forward to your next one.